A few things I want to bring to your attention before we get into today's show. Over at BangTheBook.com, lots of great content, tons of game preview stuff, college basketball, college football, NFL, NHL, NBA, all those available over there at your disposal. Also, our power ratings, both college football and the NFL, situational betting articles, observational articles. We've got the Market Watch article for the NFL. We've got my top college football power ratings plays. Just tons of stuff going on over there at BangTheBook.com. We are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. Finally, you're looking to save some green here a little bit during the holiday season. You sign up over at DSI Sportsbook using the promo code BTB and the number 25. You get a $25 free bet just for signing up, 100% deposit match bonus for the sportsbook, and 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino as well. It's easy to withdraw once you meet that rollover requirement for that sportsbook bonus. But again, it's money that you don't have to deposit because you get that bonus money back. So it helps build your bankroll a little bit that way, gives you a little bit more flexibility with all the sporting events that we have going on here, basically between the two holidays. And of course, we got bowl season coming up as well. So tons of stuff going on out there in the marketplace. Use that BTB25 promo code to your advantage over at DSI Sportsbook. At BetDSI, it's only a game until you bet it. Two segments come your way here on this Friday edition of the show. The first, our Westgate SUperContest Selections segment with Wes Reynolds. Challenging week here, 3 Thanksgiving games, bunch of big spreads out there, so we talked about that stuff. And I also discussed some of my picks and leans for Week 12. So without further ado, here is this week's SuperContest segment, myself and Wes Reynolds. All right, I'm joined now by Wes Reynolds for this week's Westgate SuperContest Selection segment. Wes, how's it going today, man?
Hey, Adam, how are you, man?
Doing very well. Appreciate your time, as always, here. And for our listeners, I just want to throw out at the top of the show, we are recording this on Wednesday with a Thanksgiving holiday on Thursday. Kind of tricky to do that. And then Friday, we didn't want to record it live. Wanted to make sure that we had something ready to go for that Friday show. So we are recording this on Wednesday. Does make it a little bit trickier. But this is a tricky week in and of itself, as we'll talk about here in a few minutes. My Super Contest entry, the Bang the Book podcast entry, just 1-4 last week, 26-29 on the season. BangTheBook.com entry did go 3-2. However, that one's 29-25-1 overall. Field had its best week of the season last week, 58.69%, 7,932 winners, 5,583 losers. Top 3 consensus plays all hit. Eagles were taken by 48.5% of the field, Patriots by 40%, Lions by 34.5%, and of course my lone winner last week was on the Eagles. But traditional Super Contest now 48.9%. Wes, are you surprised that last week was the best week of the season to date?
Yeah, I really was. I mean, I'm not as much of a surprise, I guess, with the Eagles, but you saw the Raiders, took some good money and some respected money last week, and with that situation in Mexico City, and I mean, they were never really in the game. I mean, it's one thing if they were competitive and then it kind of fell apart for them late in the game, but the Patriots got on them, relatively early, and the Raiders they just couldn't come back. I mean, every time they have a first down, which looks like they're going to continue a drive, they drop a pass or they have a penalty. They end up firing their defensive coordinator and making a change there because of that, which I don't know if that's a panic move or the right thing to do. But, I mean, it's kind of something where it's like, okay, we got to do something to say that we're still – to give a signal that we're still into the season. But, the Lions, that was kind of like a random game and it probably played out the way it should have. Bears had a big early lead and then end up trailing by 4 at halftime, and I fell prone to that too. And, I usually don't want to take a bad number on a play in these contests, but ended up taking the 2.5 with the Lions, and, of course, it lands 3. But, sometimes I think maybe that's a way to scare you off when a line is 6.5 or a line is 2.5, where, okay, I'm not getting the full 3 and the full 7, but it ended up not mattering in the New England-Oakland game, but it did matter in the Chicago-Detroit game.
Yeah, I was on the Raiders last week, and, I was glad to see what happened with the consensus percentages with the Patriots being taken by 40% of the field, because I thought the Raiders were in a pretty good spot there. Coming off the bye, they'd already played Mexico City. Obviously, it didn't work out for me, and, another tough week there for me in the Super Contest. But the Gold Super Contest did bounce back 57.39% last week. Best week of the season there. 264 winners, 196 losers. Top 5 consensus, 5-0 in the Gold. Gold now 49.13% on the season. So let's flip over here and start talking about Week 12 a little bit. And, Wes, obviously everyone's going to hear this segment on Friday. But one of the things that's a real challenge here for a lot of people in the Super Contest is that, as everyone knows, if you want to play a Thursday game, you have to have all 5 plays in on Thursday. This week there are 3 Thursday games. You've got spreads for Sunday out there in the 13.5, 14 range, 16 to 17 range. Couple 10s, although it looks like Tampa Bay probably going to be 9.5 in the Super Contest. We don't have Super Contest lines yet as we're recording, but we're going to use the Westgate numbers at the time of recording here. You got, I think 5 double-digit spreads on the board for Sunday, 3 Thanksgiving games, 8 teams on short weeks because of the Thanksgiving games, and then Monday Night Football. There's a lot to sort through this week. How do you do it all?
Yeah, it is a little difficult, and plus, with some of these Thursday games, I mean, some of these aren't like true openers. I mean, you got to take into account that some have look-ahead lines from the week before, or sub also, they might open a line at such low limits because you're looking at, I mean, I'm seeing where the Lions at some places were an opener of -1, and now you look and they're pretty much consensus getting 3 across the board to Minnesota. Same thing with Dallas on a look-ahead line. I think they were like, 3.5, and then all of a sudden they have that horrible performance against Philadelphia, and now they're a 1-point dog, even 1.5 some places. So, looking at these, I mean, I'm more of probably a dog player in this contest, because. I mean, with the contest, it's not always, sometimes there's an overlap on, what you bet normally in your pocket on a card, and then what you play in a contest. But sometimes it's, some plays are just contest plays and not personal bet plays. I mean, to do well in this contest, I mean, it's not always a true indicator of, like, what your betting season is like, because, you got to zig when you think some others are going to zag, in terms of being able to pick up games on the field and be able to, finish in the money or somehow have a really competitive entry in this thing. So, it forces you to take bad teams. And I mean, last week, and I've done it a couple times in the Super Contest, and you get people on Twitter and on social media or friends or whatever, like, dude, how are you taking the Browns? Because the book needs the Browns every single freaking week. And somehow they manage. I mean, last week was just, it was almost like the last straw for me with the Browns, because they lost that in the most Brownsian fashion possible. I mean, it's 13-7. You're getting 7.5. All you got to do is avoid the strip sack or a pick six. That's all you got to do. I mean, I wish Jacksonville would have just ran out the darn clock and been able to get a first down. That would have made it a lot easier. And they're going to take a knee and get out of there and take the ugly win, but they weren't able to do it. And I mean, I look at it, and then looking at the Browns this week, it looks like, okay, this is a decent spot to take them. Cincinnati has been inconsistent all season. They go on the road and get a win in Denver, which even with a down Denver team, it's tough to win there at Invesco at Mile High, and they managed to do it. So this is a spot you want to go against Cincinnati, but it just so happens that they're playing Cleveland. So how the hell do you take Cleveland here when they've hurt you so many times? I mean, they hurt me in the contest and in the pocketbook last week. So, I mean, it's almost like I can't keep going back to this team and just getting my heart ripped out week after week after week with these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on the Browns the last 2 weeks in the Super Contest, and I'm done. I mean, I went on a rant on Monday's show about them. I'm just done. I wish when they were in London, the team would have just stayed there. I really don't care. I mean, and being a Clevelander, too, I have to hear this stuff week after week. And like I talked about on Monday, typically what I'll do on Sundays is I'll go run errands. I'll go to the grocery store. I'll go to the mall. I'll, do things to go out and take care of business because there are still people watching this team for whatever reason. So lines are shorter, less traffic, whatever. Man, I don't think it's going to be the case here the rest of the year. I mean, there is a plan for an 0-16 parade in downtown Cleveland. Like, it's a grassroots Twitter thing. They're starting to get sponsors that want to help out and everything else. And, I mean, this team certainly looks like it's plenty capable of doing that, much like it looked like they were capable of going 0-16 last year. But yeah, you've got Cincinnati laying 8.5. A Bengals team is just not very good, although they looked pretty good against the Browns when these two teams played in Cleveland, and I was actually at that game. Hugh Jackson facing his former team, this and that. It looks like the Browns are the right side, but I'm done, man. I cannot do it. But that's part of it here again this week. You've got this Bengals team that's bad, laying more than a touchdown. You've got line value on the Browns. You've got a Seattle team that's not very good, laying almost a touchdown in San Francisco. Jacksonville, coming off of that ugly performance in Cleveland, they're laying 4.5, 5 on the road in Arizona. Even the games that don't have double-digit spreads just don't look all that appealing.
No, they really don't. And I mean, just one more thing on Cleveland. I kind of did a little Twitter rant, maybe a one-tweet rant, because I was like, okay, this game's good. When you're in that 3:30 window, 3:30 Eastern time window, 3 to 4:15, that 45 minutes is some of the most stressful minutes in betting every single week. And I mean, that Cleveland game, and I'm not a guy that ever calls the game over before it's over. I see that on social media all the time. I'm like, I never do that because I know the gambling gods are going to come in and wreak havoc. And I'm superstitious in that way anyway, so I never want to bush it or call a game over until it's really over. But I mean, that's a game you thought that you had with Cleveland. Okay, the situation, the dynamics of the time, the timeouts, everything that's dictated is like, okay, Cleveland can only do one thing to really mess this up, and of course they find a way to do it. And I was like, this may be the worst team in NFL history because, and I know there's been an 0-16 team, and they may end up winning a game, but I still think, I mean, they're one of the worst teams I've seen because they find ways to blow it, even when they play so hard and they're in position to cover, maybe even win a game, and they just find ways. I mean, when I saw that audible to a run on second down with no timeouts in Detroit a couple weeks ago, I was like, oh my God, this team that's just what they do, and I gotta stay away. But that does limit your pool here. In terms of which games you may want to play, because now you wonder if there's going to be an adjustment for when the Super Contest lines come out. I think it's 10 right now with Buffalo and Kansas City. Now they're going back to Tyrod Taylor after they benched him last week, and then the experiment with Nathan Peterman didn't work out well in Los Angeles. So now you have that different dynamic. I mean, there's a couple games where there's several shops that don't have lines on the board for some of these games. Jacoby Brissett still is in concussion protocol with the Colts. You don't know if he's going to play. Current line out there is probably Titans -3, -$1.20, so call it 3.5. But, he hasn't been officially cleared. San Francisco, are they going to sit Jimmy Garoppolo the rest of the year? They're going to say, we're not going anywhere, but let's see with the few games that we have left what we have since we acquired this guy for a second-round pick. So you don't know if Jimmy's going to play. This is kind of this is where it gets really interesting. Fortunately for me, I'm not in contention with line entry, so I'm just trying to pick the best 5 I can and just get a little bit of just achieve a respectable record since I'm not going to be in the money this year. It's tough to find 5 games, to be honest with you. I'm looking at this board, and maybe there's 2 games I like right now. So it's tough for me to find 5 this week.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is for me, too. And off back-to-back 1 and 4 weeks where I think I've actually capped the card fairly well. I mean, I was way off on the Raiders last week. The Browns should have covered for me. Broncos get a blocked punt and then virtually have a 100-yard pick six shortly thereafter. So, I mean, what are you going to do about that? That's just one of those things that, simply doesn't work out for you. So I thought the Broncos were a decent handicap by me. I had the Browns 2 weeks ago when they played really well against the Lions. Thought that was pretty good. Jacksonville didn't play well, but I thought I had stolen a cover there against the Chargers with that fumble that wound up being overturned, and I still can't believe that was overturned. So, confidence is low for me right now, and a week like this certainly doesn't help because you're reluctantly taking a lot of these games out there to fill out a card. Well, we'll go ahead and get into my picks here for this week, and again, a couple of disclaimers to throw out. One is the Westgate SUperContest lines are not out yet because of the time that we're recording this, so some things may change there. But I don't know how much things can change because I do like one of the Thursday night games, which would mean I'd have to get my card in early here this week with the 3 Thanksgiving games. So, injuries may not play as big of a factor. It's just hard to find 5 games Sunday and then on into Monday nighter that you like. So I am looking to play the Giants here. They should be plus 7.5 in the Super Contest. Maybe they'll be 7. I'm not entirely sure. You're hearing this on Friday, so the game will have already been played, so we'll already know the outcome. But as Wes and I talked about on Wednesday's Wednesday wagering segment, just a good spot for the Giants with the injury problems for Washington coming off that Saints loss. Also, the Giants, they got to win. And they had a good week of practice, a few more smiles around the facility. I'm sure that's something that really does help them out. But we'll head on into Sunday here and talk about some of the games I like. I like the Chicago Bears this week, and it really scares me. Right now, they're 13.5 at the Westgate. I don't think we get a 14 in the Super Contest, unfortunately. I like the Bears defense. I know Leonard Floyd is out now. That's a big loss for them. But I like this Bears defense. Mitch Trubisky's picked up some yardage. He still doesn't look all that great. But I just get the feeling here for Philadelphia that this is kind of a flat spot. You blow out the Cowboys in a big primetime spot on Sunday night. A Cowboys team that's not very good with the injuries that they have. But Philadelphia is off of 3 straight blowout wins over the Niners, the Broncos, and the Cowboys. It just feels to me like you're paying such a high premium on them in this spot that there's line value on the Bears. And this is one of those things that's really tough to do at this time of the year because Philadelphia looks so good and the eye test helps this year. The better teams have simply been covering the games. But this number just, it feels too high to me in a spot where I just don't think Philadelphia is as invested as they've been the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that actually probably is going to be one of my 5 plays as well because, you look at them right now, the Eagles have now winning in Dallas. They have a 4-game lead in the NFC East with 6 weeks to play. And, so that's almost virtually impossible to see them blowing that lead. They're going to win the NFC East. And, I just think that you're never going to see them with the best record in the NFL right now. You're never going to see them priced higher than you can get. So, this certainly to me wouldn't be the opportune time to buy on Philadelphia because, they're at their, it's kind of like looking at it as like a stock. They're at their 52-week high, I guess, if you want to use that analogy right now with them. This is a tough time to buy Philadelphia, and I certainly think this is a tough spot. Now we've said that before about them where, oh gosh, this looks like kind of a flat spot, and then they go out and blow out somebody at home. But I think you're right. We're not going to see a 14. It's going to be 13.5. So that's going to tempt some people on Philadelphia to say, okay, well, it's less than 2 touchdowns. All they got to do is win by 2 touchdowns with that number out there. But I think taking the 13.5 is probably the right way to go here. You're going to see Philadelphia in teaser after teaser, I think, for people maybe teasing it down to 7. It depends on, what teasers you play. Obviously you have to play a 7-point teaser with a lot of extra juice to get it down through the 7, or you're going to see them in a lot of those 3-team 10-point teasers, tease them all the way down to maybe 3.5 thinking, okay, well, I got them way below a touchdown. So, I mean, and then you look at the board. Some of the board does those teaser protection lines. I know that like 5 Dimes does that all the time. I mean, if you can just kind of look at it, where they're dealing the Eagles minus 14.5 plus 110. They're doing the same thing in the Miami-New England game. New England minus 17.5 plus 15. I mean, those are just like teaser protection lines. I mean, Chicago, I think, would probably be the way to go here. You got to hold your nose to do it, but I mean, sometimes that's what you have to do when you can't really find 5 plays that just jump out at you.
Yeah, and for the Eagles here, 3 straight road games coming up at Seattle, at the Rams, at the Giants. So you've got, a couple long trips. They'll probably just stay out west and then, play the Giants in a division rivalry game. So, I think that they've got some bigger things to look ahead to on the horizon. Also for the Bears here, I mean, look, you're not going to get much lower of a price on the Bears. They lost to Green Bay with Brett Hundley a couple weeks ago. Played fairly well in that Detroit loss, but as you talked about on Wednesday, had that first quarter lead, kind of progressively blew it throughout the game. And Philadelphia is just kind of casually blowing teams out. They're not really racking up big yardage totals. They're not, dominating on the stat sheet too much. My concern here is if the Bears have quit on John Fox. That's something I am worried about a little bit. But still, I think from a line value standpoint, this is one that I have to jump at. Another game that I'm looking at here on the board, a division matchup here between Tampa Bay and Atlanta. Tampa Bay getting 9.5 at the Westgate. There are some 10s out there, but I'm assuming this contest line going to be 9.5. And, the Falcons had one good performance to win on the road at Seattle. I'm not all that impressed with what they did against Dallas at home. Dallas lost Sean Lee throughout that game, and once they lost Sean Lee, it was over. Plus, Tyron Smith was already out. But a long trip back home here for Atlanta off that big win against Seattle, so it basically amounts to a short week. Buccaneers haven't left Florida in 3 weeks, so they've pretty much been sticking around the Sunshine State. But I know that this is an angle that you like to play, so I wanted to make sure I brought this up on the segment here. But people are talking about the playoffs for Atlanta now. They're not talking about this game. They're talking about Atlanta trying to chase down New Orleans in the division race. They still have to contend with Carolina as well. But people aren't talking about the Week 12 game against Tampa Bay. They're talking about the long-term look for the Falcons. And when that's the case, I think it's a pretty good time to go against a team.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, Tampa Bay looked like they bottomed out in Arizona, and then with Jameis being out and then Mike Evans being suspended, and then somehow they got the Jets, and was a low-scoring, very ugly game, but were able to beat the Jets at home. And then last week we're also able to get a win with those guys back. I'm trying to remember who they played last week, to be honest.
Miami.
But Miami, that's right. Yeah, Miami. They went down to Miami, and boy, that was a weird game where there was spread hijinks. We talked about Cleveland, especially with that total with Miami doing the lateral play. Tampa kicks a field goal with about 10 to 15 seconds left, goes up 3. And then Miami does the lateral thing on the kickoff return. Of course, the ball gets loose and Tampa recovers in the end zone. So that affected the total for that game. But, Tampa's got 2 wins in a row. They're way distant because you've got 3 teams that I think have been playing well with the Saints. Carolina was off that win on Monday night against Miami, and then of course now Atlanta coming home. Yeah, I think this is a little bit of a big number and a little bit of an overlay here. So Tampa is a game I'm probably going to use in the Super Contest as well, because I think now you're seeing some of the mainstream national media analysts talk about Atlanta and like, this is the Atlanta we were expecting. This is the Atlanta that we thought was going to be a Super Bowl contender and whatnot. And then, of course, winning at the best home field in the NFL is going to inflate that line value a little bit. I mean, this could easily be 7. I mean, this could easily be a 7.5 point line, which is probably where it should be. But, now you get 10 at some places. I mean, it'll be 9.5 in the Super Contest. But, Tampa was a team that I think was expected to be a little bit better than they were this year. You thought maybe this is the year that they're going to emerge, and they've been a bit of a disappointment so far going into Week 12 here. So, but I think that gives a little bit of extra value here too. So I think Tampa is the right track here.
Well, hopefully that one comes through as well. One more game that I really do like, and I'm going to have to pick from a couple of leans here. And again, you can check out my picks, the pick counts, the lines, the consensus, all that in our Saturday afternoon article over there at BangTheBook.com. But I think I'm going to kind of hold my nose here and kind of grin and bear it a little bit and lay the price with Seattle on the road this week. Seattle's going to be probably a 7-point favorite in the Super Contest. Maybe it'll be 6.5. I'm certainly hoping it's 6.5 as we're recording here. Westgate is showing a 6.5 on this game. But the Seahawks have dropped 2 of the last 3 games with those losses to Washington and Atlanta. In those 2 games, they only gave up 244 and 279 yards. I know they have huge injury issues in the back 7. Sherman's out, Chancellor's out, Thomas is out. They just have injury after injury back there. But, the games that they've lost, Kirk Cousins, pretty good quarterback. Matt Ryan, pretty good quarterback. Guys that can actually exploit those weaknesses and those losses to injury. The 49ers can't do that. Whether it's C.J. Beathard or Jimmy Garoppolo, I just don't think that they have the personnel, have the wherewithal to really make that hurt for Seattle. I know they're off the bye. I know Kyle Shanahan's had extra prep time, and I love Kyle Shanahan. I think he's an absolutely brilliant offensive mind. If it's Garoppolo, though, I think you get a very vanilla game plan from the 49ers. If it's Beathard, he's just not all that good. It feels like one of those spots to take the Seahawks. I think that they can bounce back. They've been through this rodeo before. Luke Jokel should be back on the offensive line. Russell Wilson's still been phenomenal. San Francisco's defense isn't bad, but they don't really have the pass rush, I don't think, to get after the Seattle quarterback Wilson with Seattle's offensive line issues. I just think this is a spot. San Francisco got that win. They're not going 0-16. I think they're very happy about that. I think this is a spot to back Seattle. I'm hoping for 6.5 instead of 7. Not my favorite play ever, but there's just something about this game that drives me in that direction.
Yeah, and I can't disagree with your rationale there. And the thing with San Francisco that is a little bit concerning, when you talk about, hey, they got to win, this isn't like the Giants situation necessarily where, they got those wins, but they've kept playing. They haven't had a bye week. Well, now San Francisco, comes off a bye week where it's like, okay, does kind of being satisfied with the fact that, hey, we got to win, kind of, set in a little bit, and maybe you don't necessarily get their best effort. I mean, I'm not in love with taking Seattle on the road here, and I think, you're probably, I mean, it's kind of a tricky thing with this Super Contest and with the current line going to be 6.5. I don't think there's going to be a huge adjustment. If they go ahead and announce Garoppolo, it might be 6 or maybe 5.5. I think you'll see more people interested in taking San Francisco if it's Garoppolo rather than Beathard because, I mean, it's that old line in the famous Tom Cruise movie Cocktail where his mentor, the older guy, kind of says, anything else is always something better. And I think that's the thing that you're getting with C.J. Beathard here, where it's like, okay, Jimmy Garoppolo has never played for this team. It's probably going to be a vanilla game plan. He doesn't know the offense, but they did give up a second-round pick for him, so, they got to play him at some point. And, I guess like no time like the present. I mean, why wouldn't you just go ahead and see what you have and use this 6-game sample size that you have left in the season to kind of give you a barometer, a little bit of what we can do. I mean, you're not worried about being secretive and, we don't want to give something away for next year. I mean, if you're going to give up a second-round pick for a guy, you got to play him because a second-round pick is a pretty valuable commodity in the NFL and the traders market. I mean, when you pick in the second round, that's somebody that whatever position is going to end up, you would like to think being a starter for your organization. So, can't disagree with the logic in terms of taking the Seahawks here. I mean, it would be Seahawks or nothing, but this wasn't one of the games that jumped out at me. But, I think at least your rationale and your explanation is definitely on the right track.
So right now we're looking Giants, Bears, Buccaneers, Seahawks, and of course if I play the Giants, I'm going to have this in on Thursday. So, when you're listening to this segment on Friday, I should have an idea of what I've gone with here in the Super Contest, but that means I have to find one more game here, and that's not particularly easy this week. Couple of games here on my leans list, and again, I can use all day Wednesday to figure out what I want to do here, so I do apologize to our listeners that we're recording so early, but with the holiday, not really a whole lot of choice there. I can make a compelling case for the Carolina Panthers. Both the Panthers and Jets off of bye weeks here for this week. Kind of wonder, what the mindset is for the Jets. I mean, they've already exceeded expectations. They've already played better than expected. With how bad the AFC is, statistically in the standings, they still have a chance to make the playoffs. But I don't know, how many of those guys actually believe that. I don't know what the bye week means to them. The bye week meant a lot to Carolina because Greg Olson's coming back. Ryan Khalil should be able to play. Cam Newton got a week off, which is a good thing for him. Carolina's gotten this running game going the last couple of weeks. Looks like the weather is going to be decent up at the Meadowlands. I don't love laying 4.5 or 5 with Carolina here on the road, but I think that there can be a justifiable case for taking them.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think the Jets, you wonder kind of where their mindset is a little bit because, I mean, if you remember before the season, the people were talking about the Jets going 0-16. And then all of a sudden, I mean, at one point they had a winning record when they played New England. They were 3-2, I believe. And since then, I mean, they've only managed to win one game. So you wonder if the Jets are kind of satisfied with the fact that, we're not last. So you wonder their mindset. I mean, Carolina has to try to keep pace with New Orleans. That was a game I was actually looking at for my personal entry here was maybe taking the Rams here because I don't think you're going to get a bigger public underdog. You usually don't hear the term public underdog because there's not many of them, and usually public underdogs are the dogs that get slaughtered. So, the Rams laying probably, I'm guessing, 2.5. I don't think they'll put it to 3. I would be probably something maybe I would look at because I think you got a Rams team that got boat raced on the road at Minnesota and now has to come back home to get focused. And, I don't know how much, and maybe I'm one of the only ones that don't believe necessarily in New Orleans here because I always worry about that defense, even though it's been a lot better this year. I always wonder if that thing's going to hold up. And, they're a team that's shown the ability and they have the offense to come back, but you always worry about that defense a little bit. And, I mean, it's the highest total on the board, so you would expect a shootout there in L.A. But back to your game that you originally were talking about here. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have a really compelling argument here to take the Jets. Carolina, it's one of those things I don't know about laying the points on the road, but they have been better, and I think Cam's shoulder has obviously gotten better. I mean, he looked very good against Miami on that Monday night game, and you saw in the first few weeks of the season that he was really struggling, and I don't know if he's still 100%, but I think he's learned maybe a little bit more of how to play with this injury then. I don't know what the official diagnosis, if he's 100% all good here necessarily, but, they've been winning and they've been doing enough to win. And, I mean, that's probably the direction I would go if I were to play this, but this isn't one of the ones that really stand out to me per se.
Yeah, the other one that was on my leans list was actually to look at the Rams because you've got the Saints, long travel out west, off that comeback win against the Redskins. Also last week, it's interesting that one of the top consensus play in the Super Contest Gold was the Vikings against the Rams. So that whole that public dog mindset, who knows? Maybe the Saints will be a little bit of a sharp dog. Maybe the sharp guys will look to fade what is a very, very bad situational spot. I don't know. I think it's going to be a probably probably be the highest picked game in the Super Contest here this weekend, especially with all the double-digit favorites and all that type of thing. That could be one where you see maybe both sides of that game show up in the consensus because there's just not a whole lot to pick from this week that looks all that attractive. But Wes Reynolds, thank you so much for helping me out here throughout the week with our Wednesday segment and then also the Super Contest segment. You can follow Wes on Twitter at Wes Reynolds and the number 1. We'll talk to you next week, buddy.
Okay, thanks for having me. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.